Good evening. Today is July 13, 2020, and this is the seventh episode of New Paradigms. I'm your host, Sargis Sangari, the Republican nominee for U.S. Congress in the 9th Congressional District of Illinois. My guest today is the former Lake County Sheriff, Mark Curran, who is the Republican nominee for the U.S. Senate from Illinois. Mark is a graduate of the Chicago-Kent College of Law with a Juris Doctorate in Law. Sheriff Curran began his law enforcement career initially serving as an intern in the Lake County State's Attorney Office in 1988 and became an assistant Lake County State's Attorney in 1990. While serving as a senior felony prosecutor, Mark was selected by Illinois Attorney General at that time, Jim Ryan, and promoted to the chief of the Gangs Crime Bureau, charged with prosecuting street gangs, holding seminars on fighting gangs, and serving as editor of a statewide law enforcement focused newsletter. In addition to all that work, Mark also represented the director of the Illinois State Police in employment hearings and also the Illinois Department of Corrections in civil lawsuits. Mark has served as a litigator in private practice from 2002 until 2006 and has received an AV rating from the prestigious Martindale Hubel, and which is the highest possible rating that you can receive in ethics and ability as a lawyer. Mark has also taught both business law and also criminal justice at Columbia College of Missouri. Sheriff Curran is a graduate of the Career Prosecutors Academy in Houston, Texas, and the Suburban Law Enforcement Police Academy in DuPage County, Illinois. Sheriff Curran is also a graduate of the Illinois Chiefs of Police First Time Chiefs Conference and the National Sheriff's Association First Time Sheriff Conference. Sheriff Curran was also selected by the Super Lawyers publication as a top lawyer in Illinois in 2006 and continues to serve on numerous boards at the local, state, and also national levels. If elected, the next senator from Illinois, Sheriff Curran, will be representing approximately 13 million Illinois residents in the 117 U.S. Senate. Before I begin our discussion with Mark, I want our viewers to watch a short video message from the Milwaukee County's, Wisconsin's very own Sheriff David Clark, on behalf of his close friend, Sheriff Curran.
This is about freedom and liberty in America and safeguarding it.
America's Sheriff fought so bravely for so many years on behalf of our liberty.
So what's at stake in November? It's freedom and liberty. We're going to get it done through people like Mark Curran. We elect people to sit in those positions to serve us. I'll tell you right now, I get tired of hearing that this is Dick Durbin's seat. No, it isn't. That seat belongs to the voters and the people of Illinois. That is not the
Mark, it's good to have you here. It's a pleasure to have you, and very wise words from a close friend of yours. I wanted to have you here to see how the race is going.
Thanks, Sargis. Thanks for the invite. I'm excited about your candidacy.
Thank you very much, Mark. Much appreciated. Mark, it's been very difficult, especially for policing recently. I know that we had another weekend of shootings in Chicago itself. And I want to make sure that we put one of the graphics we have up here on how many shootings took place this weekend with the fatalities. I want to get your perspective on it specifically. If you could let us know from your background as far as a law enforcement, How do we handle this issue? How do we finally get to a point where 64 shot and 13 fatalities in Chicago has not become the norm? But before we do that, the president spoke, as you know, today on this issue from the White House. I do want to play his video, and then we'll go into the discussion.
Great.
Fox News Alert, President Trump is holding a roundtable at the White House with families who say that law enforcement helped save them. Let's listen in.
You look at what's going on in Minneapolis, you look at what's going in many Democrat-run areas, but they want to defund and they want to abolish. Far-left mayors are escalating the anti-cop crusade, and violent crime is spiraling in their cities. It's all far-left cities where they have no understanding of what has to be done. They don't have a clue. And I will say that we put on a very powerful rule and law that you get 10 years, you knock down a monument. If it's a federal monument, you go to jail for 10 years. And if it's anything else, we tell them we work with the states to help them. But if you do anything where it's a federal monument, and there are a lot of them up there, and nobody's been attacked, nothing's been attacked since we did, 10 years in jail, monument or statue. In one recent week in New York City, this is hard to believe, shootings were up 358%, and yet they spend all their time, they want to do Black Lives Matter signs outside of Trump Tower. They ought to spend their time doing something else, because I'll tell you what, 358% increase in shootings in New York. Last month, over 300 people were shot. NYPD retirements have quadrupled, and they're going up even further. And New York City is out of control. Unfortunately, my place, I love it, but it's out of control. It was doing so well. And Rudy Giuliani, whether you like Rudy or not, he did a great job. He was the greatest mayor in the history of New York. Murders in Atlanta are up 133% compared to the same period last year. And one of the victims was an 8-year-old girl, and we've had younger than that in Chicago last weekend. In the last 2 weeks, 105 Americans were shot in Philadelphia and Minneapolis. The city voted to disband the police department and cut it way down, but disband it ultimately. The radical politicians are waging war on innocent Americans. That's what you're doing when you play with the police. My administration is pro-safety, pro-police, and anti-crime. And I will say, I just see a new number came in from Chicago. This weekend was a scourge. This weekend was, I guess, 20 people killed and many shootings, many shootings, far worse than the last week. So things are happening that nobody's ever seen happen in cities that are liberally run. I call them radical lib. And yet they'll go and march on areas and rip everything down in front of them. If that's what you want for a country, you probably have to vote for Sleepy Joe Biden, because he doesn't know what's happening. But you're not going to have it with me. So we've been very strong on law enforcement. We'll be doing things that you'll be, I think, very impressed with. Numbers are going to be coming down, even if we have to go in and take over cities, because we can't let that happen. When you have 20 people killed, 22 people killed in one weekend in Chicago, and you have 88 shootings, it's not even conceivable. That's worse than Afghanistan, I hate to say it. That's worse than any war zone that we're in by a lot. It makes them look like tame places by comparison, so we're not going to let it go on. We're not supposed to wait for them to call, but they don't call. We've asked Chicago, would you like us to go in and help? And they don't want to say anything. And we've called many of the cities, would you like us to go and help? We've done a great job in Portland. Portland was totally out of control, and they went in, and I guess we have many people right now in jail, and we very much quelled it. And if it starts again, we'll quell it again very easily. It's not hard to do if you know what you're doing. So I just want to thank everybody for being here. I'd maybe ask Vice President Pence to say a couple of words, and then I'd like Bill Barr to say something, and we'll go around the room. Okay? Thank you very much.
Mark, as you saw, the president was talking in aggregate how many people have been killed throughout the United States just this weekend. And he had sent a letter to the governor and the mayor, and I just want your take from a law enforcement perspective. How do you fix this?
Yeah, so Chicago's as violent as it's ever been. And, I was a prosecutor in Cook County, actually, back in the 80s as an intern, 88, 89, 90. And that was the beginning of the crack epidemic. And so you had rival gangs fighting for territory, crack cocaine onto the scene, and the homicide rate was close to 1,000. But the number of shootings right now rivals those numbers. The difference is back then, medical care wasn't as good, Sargis. So, people are familiar with Benji Wilson, who was a basketball star. They had to take him from East Side all the way over to Cook County Hospital, and he died en route. And things like that were happening, and people died from gunshot wounds a lot more back then. Similar to what happens with veterans, and you could speak to that, Sargis, very well, is that medical treatment is advanced, so lives are being saved, but we're more violent than ever in Chicago, and we're seeing little kids dying, gunshots going through windows and killing one little child after another, and this is a repeating theme that continues to happen. And I've dealt with this. I've talked to these families. It's very tragic. So we're up for grabs, and the reality is street gangs are at war with our society. They really, whether, the politically corrupt left wants to believe it or not, the truth is these people don't lose a minute's sleep when they kill a child. It's just their conscience is dead. They don't care. And they are all about taking that territory, that corner lot, that street corner for their gang to be able to push their poison out into the neighborhoods. And that's all that matters. And so that's, the reality is that Chicago is a third white, a little more than a third Latino, and a little less than a third black. 78%, 78% of the homicides in Chicago are black. And they're black on black, and they're destroying the neighborhood. So blacks that want to grow up in a peaceful environment, it's just not happening.
No, I remember you mentioned Benji Wilson, Benji's death. I'm sorry, but it really did touch us all, because I was young then in Chicago, and you didn't think something like that could happen, but it's a reality. It's been happening for a long time. My friends say that the cops are being under attack. The cops been under attack going back for decades. They just gotten more expensive now. As far as the type of attacks, David Brown recently said, the Chicago superintendent, that the problem they have is that there are too many violent offenders that are not in jail, and the electronic monitoring that's supposed to take place is not even taking place. And with and Kim Foxx letting a lot of the folks back on the streets, this is the problem you have.
Exactly. So, David Brown, he came from Dallas, and Chicago's a different animal, and I've talked to people with CPD, and he just wasn't prepared for Chicago, because Chicago is unlike any other place. And so he's down there, he's talking about throwing a big net and just infiltrating the neighborhoods with more police and more foot soldiers. But the reality is that Kim Foxx doesn't prosecute them anyway, so they're back out on the street right away, and it's not you really have to declare war on these street gangs in order to have any success.
Look, I've been asked, I was asked recently on multiple interviews going back a month ago. I said that this will continue. You mentioned the Latino issue and the street gangs. Initially, when there was policing, before these characters or politicians came in, everybody was pushed into the suburbs. The reason you saw drugs going into the suburbs because the suburban police were not ready to handle the issues or the crisis. And then now they're getting better because we started infusing federal dollars into those particular suburbs. But what happens is when you start talking about defunding the police and you start forcing the police not to take the action they want to take in order to declare war against these gangs. So what happens in the case of Chicago, you have the Hondurans and Ecuadorians using their Mexican connections to push back into these places with the turf war. You know yourself that each corner is making almost $50K So if you take in aggregate the money that is moved on drugs in these urban cities, literally, if you focus them on actually using the dollars that flow through or the business trade that flows through to positives, you can rebuild these neighborhoods. Unfortunately, right now the entire piece is tied to drugs. So it's like when we served in Afghanistan, a lot of what the Taliban was doing basically was trying to survive of the drug trade, which actually makes it through Europe into South America, into the streets of Chicago. It is what it is, but I'm hoping that when you get into Senate, you start at least pushing for some resolutions to try to fix some of this stuff, even at the local levels.
Yeah, I mean, Sargis, you're exactly right. So, you hear from the left right now, they're talking about defunding the police. I mean, how clueless could these people be? These businesses in Chicago, you go down the street after street and you see the evidence of the riots, whether the place was Molotov cocktail or whether or not, it was broken into and everything that was in, all the merchandise was taken. The CBS and building, were good friend of mine I use for a law firm at times has been looted again, and it's just there's no end in sight. And the reality is, there's great evil. These people are very evil. They could wipe out your whole family and sleep well that night. So the left doesn't, they don't comprehend the level of evil, or else they're just pandering to, a group, what have you. But the reality is, there's a thin blue line in society, and it's law enforcement that keeps the people safe. And I think most people understand it, but obviously, the person you're running against doesn't understand it. The person I'm running against doesn't understand it, and the truth is lost.
Well, look, I mean, the reality is that under their watch, this is happening. There was a video that just recently came out of a New York police officer being put in a headlock, being attacked, and people are videotaping him. Now, if that person is willing to do that to a police officer who has authority to arrest, who has a gun, and if he feels like his life is in danger, can pull it out and kill you, and they're willing to do that, what do you think they're going to be doing to regular individuals that do not have those authorities? So I think this is something that is being missed. But when you're sitting in your home with police protections like they were in Minnesota, paying to the tune of thousands of dollars per day just for their personal protection, taking decisions that, well, we're protected. As long as we're protected, we're okay. Let them do whatever they're doing in these neighborhoods. It is what it is. So either you're going to have finally law and order, or you're going to have the other side, which is something that will continue to grow, especially under the previous leadership. Mark, I want to talk to you about some international topics too. There is the Chinese government recently came out as of today, sanctioned 2 senators are going to be your colleagues when you go into the Senate, Ted Cruz and Mark Rubio, and they can now go directly, if they want, after our politicians individually, to include seizing their assets. Why? Because these 2 individuals in the Senate have taken legislation to counter what China is doing on the international global stage. I want your opinion, if possible, and share some of your thoughts on China and what they're doing as far as targeting our politics during an election year.
Well, I think that, obviously China's end game is to destroy the United States, to be the one world superpower. The United States has been in this battle for a while, but China's made no secret about it. And ultimately, you look at what they've done in terms of trade, in terms of devaluing their currency, in terms of stealing our trade secrets, our anything they can, in terms of dumping their goods and everything else to just hurt us economically, to hurt us in trade. And they've killed us for a long time. They've had this trade advantage. Additionally, you look at this Wuhan virus, and there's no question we know where it came. We know that, I think that most learned minds believe that it came from one of those 2 laboratories over there in Wuhan. and that they were in the process of some type of bioengineering of something that could be unleashed that could hurt economies. And further, we know for a fact that they knew what they had on their hands, and they shut down travel out of Wuhan to anywhere else in China, but they allowed them to travel all over the globe. So China is million of their own people have been executed in recent history, recent years. 40 million forced abortions. I mean, it's an incredibly evil government, and it's one of the most evil governments in the history of the world. And so the problem is when you got a Rubio or a Cruz that stands up, well, nobody's been doing this. You know what I mean? Chuck Schumer doesn't talk that way about us. Barack Obama doesn't talk that way about us. Well, one of the things that we like about President Trump is that he called them out right away and knew that China was out to hurt us. And something that we don't talk about a lot. You're a Christian from the Middle East, and my ancestry goes to Ireland. We used to talk about greed as a sin, and it's never spoken about anymore. But there's a lot of American corporations that killed the American worker. They got filthy rich at the top of these corporations. They sent their jobs over to China. I know of a Lake County corporation that was making their mass in Wuhan right in the middle of this epidemic, this virus. And, it's just crazy that we've allowed this to happen, and we have to push back. And I know you're in favor of trade restrictions on China. I'm in favor of trade restrictions on China. If the halls of Congress weren't lined with cowards, Sargis, we would have been dealing with this a lot better. But, ultimately we were in a bad situation because of our elderly people that rely on pharmaceuticals when 95% of the pharmaceuticals were coming out of there. But, it's got to end.
Look, Mark, it's not just our elderly. The U.S. military, majority of the medication that we receive, that we use on our combat soldiers, are actually controlled by China. China is actually maneuvering itself to be able to control almost 80% of the manufacture when it comes to foods. Everything that is processed here goes there, gets reset back here to include pork products. I don't know what China's putting in that pork product that I'm eating or consuming, but if they cannot stop us from getting the PPEs, they'll starve us to death. China has taken steps. As you know, I was in Japan in February of 2015, and I talked about the dangers of China on stage there when we were talking about other issues as far as what was happening in the Middle East at the Japanese Anti-Terrorism Conference. I came back, wrote an article for the Near East Center for Strategic Engagement in October, looking at what China's proposed plan was in the previous administration and the current nominee from the Democrats, Vice President Biden at that time, agreed to China's plan, where U.S. suddenly started focusing on South America because really it was more of a focus as for trying to expand their future voting numbers. In order to be able to continuously keep their party in particular positions within the Senate and Congress. And at the same time, they shifted away from India, our ally today under the current administration, and focused on supporting Pakistan, which is part of the Chinese plan to expand their Belt and Road Initiative. The majority of the Pakistan legislators are sitting or receiving money from Chinese businesses. The current administration came in, shifted away from South America, focused on India, and now you can see what China is doing, moving its multi-force structures in Djibouti, while it's even using its ability here to affect our internal politics, going after our politicians with direct sanctions. And a lot of one thing that people don't understand, China does tie into a lot of these initiatives that come out of Congress through their lobby groups. They pour a lot of money in there. So as an example, when we're trying to be energy independent, to include our pipelines here that we're trying to use, or fracking, China actually works with various different environmental groups to be able to push back against us. As an example, they use the coronavirus as a means to move into Argentina, Bolivia, and also Peru, taking over the iridium mines. There's almost 68+% of the iridium mines that fall under their control, 64 to 68, while they use our political operatives here in Washington to put pressure on Congress and the Senate to ensure that we do not develop our own capabilities, to include the ability of us to develop in Texas an advantage against China. So this is how China works. When we were in Afghanistan, there were attacks that were conducted against Japanese mining companies, and once we did the investigation on, we realized that it was paid for by China through the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which is the main reason why we cannot really counter Russia and Syria, or we cannot counter Iran when it comes to the sanctions. I hope that when you go in to the Senate, that you will work with individuals like Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio to try to do your best, and what I will try to do my best when I'm in Congress.
Yeah, I was a Rubio delegate.
Mark, I want to go ahead, buddy. Go ahead.
No, I ran as Mark was asked by the Rubio campaign to run as a delegate 4 years ago, and you're right. I think he's shown the independence and the strength of character to do the right thing time and again.
Mark, you did mention the president in his talk had mentioned also a couple of things when it came to immigration. I know DACA is big on his plate. Of course, the Congress, again, and Senate did not do anything about DACA. The Supreme Court had to actually come in and voice their opinion on an executive order by the previous administration. What are the main key things that you're looking at when it comes to immigration and DACA that you could work on when you're in the Senate?
I think that there's a lot of things that need to be done. You mentioned India, and I think that that we've kind of blackballed India as far as immigrants coming into this country, and that's wrong. They've been wonderful partners in so many ways, and they've made for wonderful American citizens. So, obviously that's something I'd look to be changing. The reality is, Sargis, is that I want a border wall. I want security. I want beefed up presence with regards to Border Patrol agents and ICE agents and all of that. I want to keep America safe. I recognize the dangers of radical Islam and recognize the importance of the FBI and vetting people to come into this country. But we have to be honest that in order to get those things, we're going to have to address the people that have been here for a long period of time. And I think that we need to sit at the table, and DACA is a good start. And I like what the president's done.
Yeah, I think that what the president has talked about, again, DACA was an executive order. It should have never been to a point where it had to be an executive order. Congress needs to start doing their job, and they take absolutely no step to fix anything because they only care about being reelected. They don't want to do what is important for America.
Send Tchaikovsky and Durbin to the corner. I mean, these people that sit there and try to stay forever, it's just not good.
Mark, to be honest, I think it's beyond there too. Somebody asked me, they go, "What do you think about the incumbent that you're running against?" I said, "I don't even think about her because there's really a machine that has kept these individuals in their places, and unfortunately, all they do is they go in and vote."
I agree 100%. And you look at she has not been a friend of Israel. And both of them, neither of them spend any time back in this state and do anything for the people, in your case, of the 9th, and for me, the entire state. And, they've abandoned Illinois, and that's why the machine that they represent has destroyed Illinois economically.
No, it's on the DACA issue, we got to do something to open up a pathway to citizenship for those 800,000 Americans that are out there. I have my ideas. I've presented them before on the possible stuff. We could do it from multi-services to include possibility if they want to, or we can. We used to have programs where you had Americans going overseas to support various different countries on specific humanitarian assistance programs. We could have the same programs here in the United States and execute those to allow these individuals to pay back. And a lot of them have paid back, given the fact that we've even had individuals who were part of what we call today DACA, that actually, when I was in the Army, they had actually
Right.
served with the U.S. multi-forces and they've sacrificed
Right.
downrange. So
Gotta
we
quit
could
playing
get to
politics with this, right? We
no,
have to
you
quit
gotta,
playing
yeah,
politics.
we got to
Do the
call it
right
as
thing.
it is. We got to do what is important to America. It doesn't matter your political party. It's got to be done
Yeah.
for the best of U.S. interests. But you were telling me about Durban. There was a story that I said to Valerie Ramirez, who's running the tent from last week. And when I was in line, we were ready in that cold, on that cold day in November to actually be the first ones to hand in our paperwork to be the first one on the ballot. There was a older Spanish lady with her mom there, and they were out there waiting with me in that freezing cold, and they were holding the spot for her son, and her son had decided to actually file to run at local level as a Democrat in Illinois, and we started talking, became friends. And I remember on the morning, Dick Durbin, who doesn't show up, he's not going to stand in line. He's going to have somebody get that paperwork in ahead of schedule. And by the way, when you're standing in line, for those who don't know, Dick Durbin's paperwork goes in front of you. Although you've been standing there freezing your behind off. That's just how the machine
Right.
politics works. And same thing
Yes.
with Jan Schkowski's. So he shows up there. And the mom asked me, she's excited to see him. She goes, "Do you think I could take a picture with him?" I said, "Why not? He's a leader in your party, your son's party. Go take a picture with him." She goes, takes a picture with him, introduces her son, says, "One day my son can be the president, hopefully." And all I saw from Dick Durbin was he smiled, this goofy smile, and didn't even say anything back. He didn't say, "God bless him. I'm glad he's doing, aspire for great things." And when she came back, she was all excited. And I saw that she had a briefcase. And on this briefcase, there were etchings. And it was a leather briefcase. And it was very beautifully done. And I said, "What is that briefcase for? Where did you get it?" And the story was that, well, when my mom came here, the lady who was there with her, that all the paperwork that they had were in this briefcase. So I said, "You know what, young man, give me your phone." And I took his phone from him while, we're standing in line trying to get our way in. And I said, "Okay, you're going to tell the story with your mom standing there and go." So I aimed the phone at him, took the video. I just asked the question. They said the story. Mom said the story. And I said, "Mom, you've done a good job. I think
God
Mom
bless you,
deserves a
sir.
kiss."
That's
And
why.
then
Yeah. So
but that's
you're
it. That's,
connected to people because you didn't lose. You didn't go to Washington D.C. for 38 years. Have lobbyists buying you steak dinners every night, having all these people kiss up to you so that you'll vote the way they want you to. You're continuing to be in touch with regular Illinoisans, as I have done as well, and so that's why we need some turnover, despite not just these bad voting records and all that these people have done to destroy the state, but ultimately this is what was envisioned, that we would have citizen legislators that did not spend their whole lives in Washington, D.C.
And I know that you and me are both for term limits. We're gonna, once we end the
Sure.
show, there's a video we're gonna show on the term limit issue. But before we get there, Mark, I wish we had more time. I would like to bring you back again in the future if possible
Happy
to
love
talk
to.
a little bit more. That would be my
Yeah.
pleasure. But I want to give you some time right now. If there's anything else you want to really talk to the voters about, and then also tell us about if they want to support and where would they go to help you and support your campaign.
Well, thank you, Sargis. So it's Mark Curran. As Sargis mentioned at the beginning of the program, somebody that's been a county, state, and federal prosecutor, somebody that's the longest serving sheriff in Lake County, Illinois history, a background in law enforcement, in a lawless society I'll be coming into, somebody that had a great record. That's me as sheriff. And so the race has myself as the Republican nominee. We've also got 4 other candidates. I'm the only pro-life candidate in there, the only one that really is fighting on the issue of liberty. And Willie Wilson, black billionaires in the race. A good guy, but is not right on a lot of the issues. I am right on these issues. I will fight for the middle class. I'm a middle class guy that recognizes that the middle class has had their lunch handed to them for way too long. We need to bring these jobs back home. We need to start protecting the middle class. We need to get the government off the backs of small businesses. Too many regulations, too much litigation, and those are things that I'll work towards. So you can go to electcurran.com, electcurran.com. Anything you can contribute is very much appreciated. And Sargis, thank you for having me today.
No, Mark, it's my pleasure. I'm sorry we just don't have enough time. I wish we would have more time to spend. We're looking at expanding our program in the future, but I will definitely have you back
Thank you, buddy.
as we get closer to election day. Same thing for me. I would recommend everybody please go help Mark. Mark, let me ask you a question. I've asked this from everybody. Has the Illinois GOP provided any monetary support as far as the campaign is concerned?
So not the Illinois GOP. Some of the local county chairmen are going to help me put on some fundraising events, but it's tough. I mean, as you know, we're the smaller party, just like our revolutionary soldiers were the smaller army, and we're going to have to work that much harder.
Well, look, you'll never have enough resources and personnel, right?
I'm sorry.
You'll never have all the resources, personnel, and money you need, but it would be helpful to be able to get some support to move forward. But same thing with me.
Yeah, same with you, raising money, and it's a struggle. The state party's not in a position to give you any money. They don't have any money, right? And so we need to rely on people that believe in the fight. Let's not wave that white flag today.
No, we have an opportunity to change Illinois, especially during this election. And I think that people really are not looking for alternative. They're looking for a complete change across the spectrum. And I think that having new blood coming in, new perspective, I think will help, especially with your law background and your background as a law enforcement officer. Same thing for me. I would recommend everybody please try to go to Mark's site, donate, support him. Same thing for me. Please go to votesangari.com, votesangari.com. We need donations. We're getting our yard signs, Mark. We're almost getting 20 yard signs out at any given time. I think this election, from my perspective, is going to be more tied to name and face recognition, and we're going to try to get as much information about you out there, as much as information I can about myself. And let's see what happens. It's probably going to be decided sometime with 10 days out from election day. And let's just hope it works out. Please, I ask everybody to go out and support Mark. And same thing for me, votesangari.com. We need the money. We need the support to be able to move forward. Mark, you got the last word before we finish off with our video on term limits.
I think what you said is spot on. Term limits are key. These people that they go to D.C. and they're at the end of the day, all they care about is getting reelected. They're bought and paid for, and your vote, your voice has gotten lost. So you get, these campaigns cost money. You got to give money to Sargis. You got to give money to me. If it matters, we're out there fighting, we're sacrificing, but we need your help. So please. Prayerfully consider giving money to both Sargis and myself, and in the hopes that we take it to them, which we will, and victory is very possible. God bless.
It is possible. God bless, Mark. God bless our viewers. Thank you very much.
Take care.
Our first witness, Mr. Tumbelidis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Senators, for providing me an opportunity to address this important issue. I want you to imagine for a moment that you are an employer and you've got some problems with your employees. When you hired these employees, they promised they would do exactly what you asked of them. But once they got the job, they became a nightmare. They stopped listening to you and started using the job to line their own pockets. They took the company credit card and racked up more debt than you could afford to pay back. They became so obsessed with keeping their jobs that they forgot to do their jobs. And after all that failure, all that disappointment, and all that incompetence, your employees came to you and said, "We deserve a raise." If you're a reasonable person, that should make your blood boil. And yet, that is exactly what it feels like to be an American taxpayer. The first three words in our Constitution are "we the people." It's written larger than anything else because the framers of that document, the architects of our republic, wanted to remind you at all times who's in charge. We the people. We are your employers, and you have an obligation to listen to us. So I come to you with a message from the American people. We demand term limits for members of Congress. In fact, according to the most recent national polls on the issue, 82% of Americans want term limits. That includes support from 89% of Republicans, 76% of Democrats, and 83% of independent voters. This is not a left or right issue. This is an American issue. In fact, term limits could be the only issue with support from both President Trump and former President Obama. Now, there was a time about 25 years ago when Congress was debating this. Nearly every opponent of term limits up here had the same rebuttal: experience, experience, experience. We need experience to do this job right. If only you leave your Congress member in office for decades on end, he or she will become such a policy expert that all our problems will be solved. In hindsight, that was one of the worst predictions ever. This system is broken. Congress has given us $22 trillion in debt, the longest war in American history, a broken health care system, a broken immigration system, a tax code written by lobbyists, an explosion of money in politics. Worst of all, too few here have the courage to address these problems because the only focus is on getting reelected. That's why it comes as no surprise that Congress has a 14% approval rating, and 60% of Americans say that they would fire every single member of Congress if they could. Congress is less popular than traffic jams, root canals, and hemorrhoids. You're beating head lice, but the lice have asked for a recount. Unfortunately, elections alone cannot fix this problem. Not because voters like you guys so much, but due to the nearly unbreakable power of incumbency. At the same time members of Congress publicly claim elections are free and fair, they secretly deploy every trick in the book to keep power. Incumbents get $9 in special interest money for every dollar that goes to a challenger. And if incumbents are having difficulty raising money, not to worry, they're allowed to send campaign-style mailers at taxpayer expense. That's to say nothing of all the free media and name recognition politicians naturally get just for being in office. The incumbent advantage creates a barrier to entry for everyday Americans without the connections to fund a campaign. It is the case for term limits. Elections may in theory be capable of dethroning incumbents, but that isn't how it works in the real world. Congressional incumbents have a 98% re-election rate. That probably explains why Congress looks more like a country club than a melting pot. It's predominantly made up of lawyers and politicians, and is disproportionately old, white, rich, and male. Term limits would give us a legislature that better reflects the diversity of our society. The message long-term incumbents send to young people like me seems to be, we want you just close enough to the political process to help us win, but don't get too close and take our jobs. The American people have lost confidence in this Congress, and for good reason. We routinely see abuses of power. 18 months ago, it was revealed that members of Congress were secretly using taxpayer money to settle lawsuits, some for sexual harassment. You still haven't disclosed how our money was spent and on whose behalf. So term limits is a check on arrogance, it's a check on incumbency, and it's a check on power. It's a way to restore political courage while bringing fresh faces and ideas to Washington. As Ben Franklin said, for the rulers to return among the people was not to degrade them, but to promote them. As Kanye West said, no one man should have all that power. Here's the dilemma we face. Over 80% of Americans want term limits to happen. Donald Trump and Barack Obama want it. It is being blocked purely by the self-interest of Congress. If this were a trial, you all would have to recuse yourselves because there is a colossal conflict of interest. If term limits pass, you won't stay in the limelight forever. You won't be the center of attention, and some people might even stop laughing at your jokes. You'll have to become ordinary citizens. And that is, my friends, the entire point. We're asking you to do what's right and listen to the people you represent. It's time to bring the gravy train into the station, end the reign of career politicians, and give Congress back to the people. please support Senate Joint Resolution 1 for term limits. Thank you.